What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the Warmind cell nerf that happened this season, and we'll first be breaking down exactly what that was, and be going over if I think they're still going to be viable to use in the game in different situations. And overall we'll be discussing if it's time to move on to bigger and better things. My code AIR is 30% off for G Fuel through the 6th. Definitely take advantage of that. Click the link in the comments and description. It'll take you over to their store. Find something that sounds good to you. And yeah, let's go ahead and begin. So if you've been living under a rock for the past year and a half, the way Warmind cells work, or you use a Icalos weapon or a Seraph weapon, and then you pair it with at least one Warmind cell mod, so for example Global Reach, and that will enable those two weapon types to create Warmind cells, which are just glowing balls on the ground. You shoot them and they explode. And you can also throw on other mods for additional effects. But this season they got nerfed pretty hard. So looking at the first one, to base Warmind cells, they reduced the radius of explosion and the effect of Warmind cells from 10 to 6 meters. Then reduced damage of the explosion of Warmind cells. It was previously 200 to 400, so at the very center of the explosion would be 400, and at the very edge 200, and now it's 50 to 250. So just right off the bat, this is already extremely noticeable, both the damage and the range. If you use Warmind cells a lot before, there's all kinds of situations where you explode it now and you're just like, before everything would have died, and now there are very noticeable situations where there's enemies just that don't seem that far away and they just don't even get touched. Then on top of that, with higher health targets, for example majors, these things barely even tickle them anymore, even at the middle of the explosion. And as enemies get further and further away from the center, all the way up to the max range of 6 meters, they're barely taking any damage now. So not only is the range a lot worse, the damage drop off is very extreme. And the global reach change was they increased the mod cost to 3. They also reduced the radius increase from 20 meters to 10 meters. So before, the base radius of the Warmind cell explosions were 10 meters, then global reach would take it to 30. Now the base is 6 and it only gets increased by 10 to 16. So now with the full global reach range, we're barely over half of what it used to be, which is extremely noticeable. And once again, the damage fall off from the center explosion is very extreme also. But with global reach on, it still is a very respectable range, and it is really good. It's just not as good as it was, but don't get me wrong, it still is very good AoE damage and AoE accurate. So in terms of global reach costing 3 now, it's still definitely worth using. The third change it made was to the Cellular Suppression mod. They reduced the duration of the suppressing effect when using the mod from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. So this one was extremely powerful for content that you were under light. You just get Warmind cell to spawn in, and every single time you tap at it, it will then suppress everything nearby, and that would combo with global reach to have a pretty crazy range, right? And now as you see just how far that servitor is to the Warmind cell, it's not even touching them. So now it's gonna be very hard to justify using this mod, not only because of the decreased timer on the suppression itself, but also the stark difference in range compared to what it used to be. And the final change it made was Wrath of Rasputin. They reduced the bonus solar damage. Previously it was 100 to 200, and now it's 25 to 100. And when I first read this patch though, I was very confused because Wrath of Rasputin doesn't say it adds solar damage. What it does is make solar damage kills create Warmind cells, and it's Rage of the Warmind that adds the solar damage. So I'm not sure if they just put the wrong mod name, or if Wrath of Rasputin all along was adding solar damage and we just didn't know about it, or it just wasn't widespread knowledge. But either way, if we look at that full combo now with the 3 golden Warmind cell mods, the ones that were pretty much must use for the past several seasons, the full combo of infinite chaining Warmind cells still definitely works and is still very good, but it only works that well when you're in very close quarter encounters where, you know, the Warmind cell explosion will kill 5 to 7 things and create another one for you. But if you find yourself in areas that are more spread out, the Warmind cell explosion might not kill that many things, which means it won't chain to the next one, and you're pretty much just wasting 2 extra mods for the same thing you could just be doing with just a single global reach. But overall, this combo is still extremely strong and low in content where there are a lot of things grouped together. But once again, you can definitely feel the difference of what it used to be. And this Lost Sector gameplay, once I would spawn it in the first Warmind cell, I could chain it pretty much all the way to the boss and never shoot another ad. So is it worth using these mods still? Well, I think for just global reach and something like that, Icalos SMG, I think that will always be a good combo and worth using because the cost of entry is still extremely low, just your primary weapon, than just a 3-point mod. Even though the range and damage of the explosions are a lot worse than they used to be, that still is really good AoE accuracy, really good chunk damage, and compared to other things in the game, it's still worth using. But now for the 3 mod combo, if you're just playing low tier content and you're just kind of running through stuff, it's still definitely viable, but it's not so strong that it is like a must use like it was in the past. So instead you could just drop it down to a single global reach, which will allow you to use 4 other mods, and the Warmind cell part won't like dominate your build, so you still have room to use other cool things. But Warmind cells in content that is a little bit harder, so not like just running through strikes or patrol, things like that. If you're doing like master or grandmaster activities or even raids, I think it's gonna be a lot harder to justify using Warmind cells at all. Before, some people still use them in GMs with things like Xenophage, and whenever you kill a champion or a mini boss or something like that, it would create a Warmind cell. But the thing about the damage and the range fall off on Warmind cells now, I just don't think it's worth using 3 of your 5 mod slots on something that will have such low uptime. And even when you get one to spawn in, I mean, you gotta think about how much damage they're doing now. If you're under light, they're probably gonna be doing barely like any chip damage to the things like right next to explosion. Then the things at like the further range of the explosion would probably only be getting slightly tickled at best. So using a build like that, I just don't think would be worth the cost of the 3 mods. So how about dropping it down to just something like Ico's SMG and Global Reach? That was something you could do before, and using a SMG and a GM wasn't very ideal. But once you got one Warmind cell to spawn in, you kind of kill all the low tier enemies or chunk some of the higher health targets and kind of get them weak for you, and it was still kind of worth doing. But now with the Warmind cell explosions itself being way weaker, and comboing that on top of the fact that you're using SMG while under light, I just don't see that being good at all. So overall, are Warmind cells worth using, or is it time to move on? I still think they're viable for lower tier content, and I think they always will be. The Ico's SMG is still a very solid SMG just to use in general. Then pair that with just a singular mod that costs 3 energy to have really good AoE accuracy. That will pretty much always be good. This is not as strong as it used to be, which is a good thing, because it allows a lot of breathing room for the other mod systems, for example the elemental wells and even chargeable light. But when it comes to the in-game content in the game, it's definitely time to move on. There are way better things you can be doing with your 5 mod slots. And once again, I just want to make it super clear my stance on this. I'm extremely happy that Warmind cells aren't as good as they used to be. During the first season or 2 that they were out, they were extremely fun to use, and unlike anything we've ever seen in the game before. But myself and I think a lot of other people quickly realized that they were pretty much just choking the rest of the entire like weapon ecosystem in PvE, and created a monopoly on the entire like primary weapon type in PvE. If someone didn't create Warmind cells, it was just not worth your time. And yeah, you can make the case that you could use other stuff, you know, in lower tier content. You didn't have to run the best option at all times. But knowing how I am and the content I make, trying to figure out like the best things to use at all times, Warmind cells were so strong that I just felt like a must to use for such a long time, and there was nothing else close in the game that could even compete with them. But now, as you've seen already this season, I've been playing with the elemental well mods a lot, pretty much using them in every single build I've uploaded so far this season, and overall just having a lot of fun with this new refreshing meta that we have this season. Anyways, I think that's gonna be it for the video. Let me know what you think about all these different changes. Are you happy like me? Or are you kind of sad that they're not as broken as they once were? Once again, my code ERROR is 30% off for G Fuel through V6. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.